America Talks Live, and I could assure you my next guest and myself will not get into the heated battle that you just saw between our two guests on the panel. But nonetheless, we welcome in Joel Pollak, Senior Editor at Large at Breitbart, author of See No Evil, 19 Hard Truths the Left Can't Handle, and his new book, How Trump Won, the Inside Story of a Revolution. There it is on your TV screen. Good to see you, sir.
Good to be with you.
Thank you very much for coming up. So before we get to the book and all that, so much going on. Let me ask you about the John Lewis situation. It's one thing for him to say, and I've been harping on this the whole show, it's one thing for him to say Russia, illegitimate, I mean, I'm not going to the inauguration. That's bad enough. But media seems to be overlooking when Chuck Todd asked him if he reached out and wanted to make amends and said, take me to Selma. John Lewis said, I would not take him. That has nothing to do with Russia. That has nothing to do with the election. That has nothing to do with Hillary Clinton. That's, I said, hate in his heart.
It's a funny thing for him to say because in 2012 at the Democratic National Convention, he gave a speech about how he had forgiven one of the men who had beaten him at the bridge on that fateful day in Selma. So if he can forgive somebody who actually beat him and bloodied him and his fellow demonstrators, why can't he invite Trump to the bridge?
Yeah.
I mean, it's politics, it's partisanship. I think people are starting to see that, and it's not nice to see these fights, but that's what this is about.
Absolutely, and it's a shame. And of course, the media, and that's the business you or I are in, and the double standard and the hypocrisy, they're just are overlooking that completely. And I think that's a very telling statement that he made.
Yeah, the journalists in general, not everybody, are trying to make this a point against Trump as he comes in. This is a theme to tie into Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Going into the weekend,
Martin Luther King weekend. How dare he tweet out on Martin Luther King weekend?
Right. It's as if Trump initiated this thing.
Right.
And of course it was John Lewis. And I think, this is my own theory, I think Lewis is acting as a surrogate for the White House here because on Sunday morning on State of the Union, Jake Tapper on CNN asked Dennis McDonough, the chief of staff of the White House, whether Obama saw Trump as legitimate. Obama described Trump as freely elected,
yes,
but not as legitimate,
yes,
and McDonough wouldn't say. And so they've got Lewis out there saying Trump is illegitimate. Obama won't say that Trump is legitimate. This has become the talking point, I think, across the board. And Lewis is a much more difficult person to respond to, given his heroic history.
Right.
Problem is, he has a pattern of doing this over the last few years, and eventually, as Rand Paul said later, also on CNN on that same program, he said, because I oppose what John Lewis is saying, it doesn't mean I'm opposed to civil rights.
Right.
And people are starting to make that distinction.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. The inauguration, I know that we've had reports of groups paying. There's a report on the Gateway Pundit we just talked about with Jim Hoft, which led to a brouhaha. One group paying $2,500 a month to protesters to do everything anti-Trump. And we have James O'Keefe, the great James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, who today has made some news. I know you know more about it than I do. He's infiltrated some of these anti-Trump groups that are planning to attend the inauguration.
The new O'Keefe video, just out Monday, is about an attempt by a left-wing group to disrupt an event called the Deplorable, which was being organized by some grassroots groups. And allegedly, at least according to what you see on the video, this group was planning to use stink bombs in the building, and if that didn't work, to trigger the fire sprinkler system so everyone would have to run outside. It sounds like a harmless prank, but I know that the DC police, FBI, Secret Service are taking it rather seriously. James O'Keefe took his video and his investigation to the authorities, and they were very concerned about it. So that's part one. We'll see what James comes up with in parts 2 and 3 and whatever. But definitely he has gone inside these movements and is trying to show who's really responsible for the chaos. There's a story out in California this weekend, or this past weekend, about left-wing groups predicting that Trump's inauguration is going to trigger violence against minorities and so forth. There's been this kind of projection for the last several months, but James is out there showing where the violence is really coming from.
So. And amazingly, O'Keefe took the video to the authorities, and he hasn't been arrested and charged with anything.
Yeah,
like the Planned Parenthood guy. It's just a, it's a
those charges were dropped too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, right.
After all that, but they don't tell you that. All right, so. What are you looking forward to most? I mean, I know Israel's very important to you. It's very important to me. We had Obama on 60 Minutes yesterday proudly announcing I was the one who said we should abstain, and Israel's been a problem with the settlements for my entire 8 years, and laughed at Netanyahu being bothered by, he's bothered by a lot of things. First of all, do you see anything happening this week at the UN before Obama gets out? and what will Trump do to make it better?
I wouldn't put it past the Obama administration to try to sneak something by, but it does look like the nations that gathered in Paris on Sunday for this peace conference, without Israel, of course, because why would Israel be at the table for anything? They weren't at the table for the Iran deal. You know, we'll decide what happens there. The nations seemed more timid in their declaration, and that may have been because they're a little bit worried about what Trump might do in retaliation. I think Trump has made it clear that his policy preference is very different from the Obama administration's, and I think they don't want to use this last week. Obama might want them to. Obama doesn't care. He's leaving the scene. But people who are still governing other countries might not want to antagonize the Trump administration, might want to try to work together even if they have differences. And so I think they tempered their resolution or their final declaration. So I don't know if anything will happen in the last week. Certainly the damage done by UN Security Council 2334 is going to be around for a while, very difficult to rescind something like that. And I think Trump's response is going to be pretty immediate. I would think they're going to move the embassy to Jerusalem, despite all the sort of implied threats about that. And I think they're going to develop a much stronger relationship with the Netanyahu government and with Israel in general. And I think that's one of the things that'll change. I think in general, if you just take a step back and look at what happened this week, what's really amazing is that the American people elected a complete outsider to the highest office in the land. And people talk about that possibility. It's the subject of movies with Warren Beatty and other people. And it actually happened. It actually happened after decades of being this idea that was sort of thrown around in the public imagination. I think if you strip the partisanship and all the issues of the day aside, that's the really remarkable thing about this election. It's an Andrew Jackson moment. And I think that's what will be interesting to see.
It is, and that speaks to your book, How Trump Won, The Inside Story of a Revolution. By the way, tell the folks when it's coming out, where they could get it.
The ebook comes out Tuesday, January 17th. You can get it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and the paperback comes out next month in February. So we are on a very fast march to publication, and that's the quickest they could turn out. The printed version is February, but if you like the ebook, if you like reading ebooks as I do, you can get it on Kindle or on Nook.
Well, that speaks, and I wanted what your previous answer speaks to your book, I'm sure. And also, we have an outsider, and that's what we all have aspired to. Anybody could be president. Anybody could be president. And then, but everything about an outsider that applies to Trump, the media trashes. Oh, look at this. He has a business. Oh, look at this. He has a family. Oh, look at this. He's not a politician. So it's kind of what you would expect, since it's a right-wing sort of Republican outsider.
Well, he's not even a conventional Republican.
No.
It was so interesting to see over the course of the election, especially in the latter stages of the primary, the conservative intelligentsia basically come out against Trump.
Yeah.
That's really unusual.
National Review, all of that, the whole thing.
And I don't think he alienated most of those people completely. I think many of them came around in the end. One of the things I talk about in the book, How Trump Won, is the Comey announcement. And I don't think that convinced Clinton voters to switch to Trump, but I think it did convince a lot of Republicans to finally come together around Trump, because they couldn't quite bring themselves to vote for someone who was going to be under criminal investigation. And I don't think it won the election for Trump, but I think it probably restored it from what felt like, at least at the time, an 80-20 contest where Trump was on the 20 end, to more of a 50-50 contest in the last couple of weeks. I think it really made it more of an interesting horse race, and it was fun to cover.
How did he survive? We got a minute left. How did he survive things that would have ordinarily knocked out other candidates?
Simply by perseverance. And he didn't play by the rules of media controversy. He didn't play by the rules of personal scandal. He simply stuck it through. And that's actually one of the best reasons, I think, objectively, for his presidency. The American people want someone who's going to be strong, a strong leader, and there he was, sticking it out. He survived all these things. He will face bigger challenges after Friday. But people liked to see that somebody wasn't going to buckle. Republicans certainly like to see it because they're always getting a hard time from the media, and the media is always ruining their campaigns. But especially, I think, against foreign leaders, foreign challenges, I think people understand that he's going to stand strong.
Great to see you, sir. Congratulations on the book. We'll speak to you again soon.
Thank
Enjoy the inauguration.